Hey y'all. Now to this point, we've talked a whole lot about different ways you can customize Wireshark. We've talked about a bunch of different preferences. We've talked about layouts, about adjusting and adding columns, about coloring rules, a whole lot of really valuable stuff that's useful in helping you make decisions about the analysis you're performing on packets to solve a specific type of problem. Now, these settings that I've showed you thus far, pretty easy to configure on an individual basis. But what happens when you want to change a lot of these settings at once and you want to maybe even kind of save groups of settings for different analysis scenarios? After all, if you're doing general troubleshooting, you might use Wireshark quite a bit differently than if you're doing security analysis. Even within one of those particular subsets, so let's say security analysis, you might investigate a system behaving oddly a lot differently than you'd investigate a system that's infected with a Trojan or maybe some scanning activity. You might want to use some different settings there. Now, previously, you might have to just change all those. You might have to keep a notepad and keep a list of the settings you like and you don't. And every time you encounter a scenario, you might have to change those settings manually, which is not really the most pleasant way to go about it. It's very time consuming and it's going to discourage you from changing those settings at all. Well, fortunately, Wireshark now has the ability to manage configuration profiles. So when you open Wireshark, you're actually opening it in the context of your own individual profile. All of the settings and the changes you make are available in the context of that profile, but you can also then make additional profiles with different groups of settings. And that's a very important concept. You can actually, all the things we've talked about to this point, layouts, columns, your coloring rules, and so on, those are stored to your profile, and you can actually save that profile, and in fact save multiple profiles that you can switch between pretty rapidly. So here we're going to talk about what those profiles consist of, how to create and edit them, and also how to switch between them. First off, let's view all of the configuration profiles that come with Wireshark by default. To do that, we're going to go to the top menu and click Edit, and then click Configuration Profiles. Here you'll be taken to this Configuration Profiles screen, which is going to show you the three that Wireshark comes with. Those are the default configuration files, so that's the one that's individual to you when you open the application. There's the Bluetooth configuration profile, and then the classic configuration profile. Now this screen's pretty simple. It just allows you to add and remove and copy these, but it also shows you the folder they're located in. So for instance, you see default is located in my own user folder. So under C users, C Sanders, app data, roaming, and then Wireshark. The other profiles are actually stored within the program files directory. So C program files, Wireshark profiles, and then there's a folder called Bluetooth, and then there's one called Classic. So what you have here is the default profile, at least in this case, is for my specific user account, whereas these other two profiles are shared amongst other user accounts that might be on the machine. So if I have 3 or 4 users, a shared kiosk type system, maybe an analyst type system that's used by a lot of people, each one of them will have their own default individual user profile, but these other two profiles, Bluetooth and Classic, will be shared amongst them on the system. And you can create these individual profiles or these group shared profiles as well. Now, it's important to note that these are actually pretty simple. They're not very complex files. So I can actually go under my default profile and click this folder location here. And it's going to open up Explorer to this directory, so app data, roaming, Wireshark, and it's going to show the files associated with this, and they're actually pretty easily readable. So for instance, let's look at preferences. I'm going to just double click that and open that in WordPad here. In this case, you'll see it's actually a plain text file just with a series of configuration values. And what you're looking at here essentially are all of the options in the preferences area. So if you go to edit preferences, you'll see that they match the things you see right here. So we have a user interface section. I can scroll down here and we have a lot of similar type things. So we can see that the GUI update interval is here. The user interface, the colors we are using are here. Some of these are commented out because they're set to the default settings. Most of them are actually in this case. But this is going to store all of the things that have been configured under that preferences area. Here we see capture information. We see we have interfaces, capture devices. We have some filtering information down here. There's a lot of different information. So I can actually close out of that And if I go to edit, well, let me close out of here. If I go to edit and preferences, you see these are a lot of the same things we already looked at. So here's the appearance area. We see a lot of the things that we saw in that particular configuration file. So there's a capture area. We see the list of default interfaces here that we have to choose from. So this is all the same stuff that we saw in that file folder. So we're going to go back in here to configuration profiles. Now, the other folders we have that are interesting here, the other files we have interesting here, are this recent file. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up here as well, again in WordPad. And what recent does, and you'll see it says it right here, is this file is generated every time Wireshark is quit. So whenever you configure certain settings in an active profile and then close Wireshark, the most recent settings you used are saved to this file. That way, when you open Wireshark back up and open that file to access that profile again, you're going to regenerate those settings. So you're going to be looking at the same thing you left behind, which is a really convenient feature. Here you see a lot of user interface things. So you see, whether to show or hide the main toolbar, whether to show or hide the filter toolbar. A lot of user interface based things are going to be configured here. We have the timestamp display format, which we talked about. So there's a lot of different options, and it's going to really make Wireshark a little bit easier to use, so you're not constantly changing settings back and forth if you've effectively leveraged these configuration profiles and the data associated. So you can actually go in and edit those manually if you like. So if you want to copy and paste those and move things around, you can. But most of the time, you can just make the changes within the application itself, and they'll be reflected in those files pretty easily. Now let's go ahead and actually create our own configuration profile here. So what we'll do is we're in the default profile right now. But what I'm going to do is going to go ahead and click this plus sign. And I'm going to click it with default selected. So I'm going to click plus, and it's going to tell me here that it's creating a profile from the default settings. And I'm just going to name this profile Chris. I'm just going to name it after myself and then hit OK. Now the thing that will have happened here is you'll see in the bottom right area of the screen we have this little profile section, and it's changed that to where it says profile Chris. And this area is where you can actually switch between profiles really quickly. So I can just click on this and then switch back over to the default profile, or I can click it again and click Chris. So that's the easy way to do that. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and customize this a little bit. Let's go ahead and go in here and go into preferences, and let's just change the layout to this nice little vertical layout here. I'm going to go ahead and OK that. Let's say I don't really want this length column. Let's go ahead and hide the length column. We'll go in here to view. I don't want the filter toolbar. We're just going to remove that. I don't know why I would do that in the real world, but for this exercise, we'll do it. And we'll completely change this view, and that's going to be saved to the to the Chris profile here. So I'm going to go back in here and edit configuration profiles, and you'll see that Chris now has its own folder in the local settings. So in C Sanders app data, roaming Wireshark profiles Chris. So there's actually a profiles folder here, and there's a Chris one, which contains a lot of the things I just changed. So it contains that preferences file, which is containing the different settings I just adjusted. So I can close this, OK out of this, and you'll see I'm set on profile Chris. I can click here and change over to default, and then I'm back to the default Wireshark view because I'm switched over to that default profile. I have my length column here. I have my display filter bar. All those things that I changed are still there. And then when I change back, it changes that back pretty quickly. So this is a really nice feature. It allows you to switch back and forth really quickly and create profiles relatively easily compared to a lot of the other profile-based systems you might find in other applications. The thing to keep in mind specifically here, however, is that when I created my new profile, so when I created the Chris profile, it created that just for my Windows user account. So remember, it put it under C users in my own folder. So with that said, that's not something everyone else is going to have access to. Only I'm going to have access to that on my individual login on this Windows system. Now, if I wanted other people to have access to it, that's not too difficult to achieve. I could actually go here and open this folder and grab this Chris profile folder. So I'll just copy that and go ahead and close that out here. And you'll notice where Bluetooth is stored is under C Program Files, Wireshark Profiles, Bluetooth. I'll just go into that Profiles folder, and we're just going to paste that there. It's going to take just a second to paste. We'll call it Chris Global, because at that point it becomes a global profile. We'll exit out of that. We'll OK out of this. For Wireshark to pick that up, we're actually going to have to exit out of it. Open Wireshark back up, open a capture file back up, go back to my configuration profiles, and sure enough, if I scroll down here, we also have this Chris Global configuration profile. So this is something now at this point that any user logged into the system would have access to, not just me. So it's a global shared profile. Of course, at that point, if anyone else edits it, those edits are shared amongst all of us. So you have to be careful in that regard, because you don't want to get used to using a profile and then another user on your same system accesses that, and then you might run into some issues with seeing some things unexpected from what you would particularly want there. But nonetheless, this is a really great feature for sharing specific configurations. I know one thing I've been known to do is go into Wireshark and configure specific profiles I like, and then go take that profile folder and zip it up and email it to colleagues, and then they can actually take that, drop that into their profile folder, and proceed to use Wireshark really in the same way I am. So it's a lot easier than just telling someone, go change this setting and go change that setting and add this column. I can very easily just say, here, copy this profile over. It comes in real handy, especially when you're doing things with columns that are based upon complex fields. So adding columns can be time intensive if you're adding a bunch of them, maybe based upon a custom protocol, something of that nature. So doing it this way and just copying that profiles folder is really one of the fastest way to get people looking at the same thing you're looking at. And certainly I would recommend, if you have a lot of people in your organization using Wireshark, is copying everyone's profile, backing them up to a centralized location. And that way everyone can grab other people's profiles, look at them, browse around, drop them into their profiles directory, and start playing around with them to see if someone else's analysis techniques are a good fit for each individual person's analysis. So it's a good way to learn from each other and really ensure that you're opening your eyes to other ways of performing analysis. So with that all said, that's really going to do it for this section on creating configuration profiles. It's a feature I find myself using quite a bit. If you actually were to go and look on my individual workstation and go down here and look at my profiles section, you would see I have a few. I have a different one for investigating latency issues. I have a different one for looking at certain types of security issues, complex infection chains and things like that you might find with exploit kits. I have a few different ones I use. And as we go throughout this course, I'm going to elaborate on specific settings I use in specific use cases. And I think you'll find yourself also creating some of your own profiles that maybe match some of mine, or at least based upon them, that fit your kind of own unique analytic style. But definitely take some time, create your own profile, maybe try copying a profile, playing with local and global profiles, seeing what you can do there to make Wireshark a little bit more customized to your needs. Really, profiles and custom profiles is really the amalgamation of doing all the things we've talked about to this point with preferences and coloring rules and layouts, and saving those so you can quickly reference them as you need to. So definitely make sure to take some time to play with configuration profiles, and we'll be referencing those and good opportunities to use those as we proceed throughout the course.